Now, like a lot of other people, I believe that the longing for soul-to-soul connection with another human being is inherent in each of us. The primary difference is how available we are to the experience of that quality of connection. You know, obviously in all our relationships, you know, we're this huge bunch of souls interacting with each other. But our capacity for the actual experience of that is influenced by how open we are, not just emotionally, but psychically and spiritually. And the things that get in the way of us are all those different ways that we had to shut down to protect ourselves as little ones. You're going to talk about opening one's heart, and yet opening up spiritually and psychically to another human being. We're talking about some of the most vulnerable and exquisite parts of ourselves. If you like, if you use inner child terminology, it's like we're the magical, mystical child in us, who is hypersensitive, easily wounded, very connected, a child of the universe. And we all have that capacity for unity within us, but most of us, if not all of us, had to anaesthetize and protect those extremely vulnerable parts of ourselves. Whether from the unconscious and unhealed energies within the family system, whether from our birth experiences, whether even from our in utero experiences. Some of the greatest obstacles to the creation of the sacred marriage has to do with us absorbing distorted, unhealed, damaged, unconscious energies, not just from our parents, as I said earlier, but also from transgenerational influences that have passed down to us. And so part of the journey to recover our capacity for the experience of soul-to-soul relationships means reversing all those tendencies. Whether we learn to shut down our hearts, whether we learn to numb out and anaesthetize, whether we learn to split off from our bodies. These are all psychic survival mechanisms for the wounded child inside us. So a lot of our work is the reversal of that. And if you look into kind of deep tantric processes, it's identical. The journey of Tantra is to unravel old ego structures. Is for us to take risks in intimacy. To take risks in having our hearts broken. Our hearts cracked open. And it's the sorting of our soul longings from our lesser desires, which is a task for all of us. You know, what is truly right for us as opposed to what we believe or think that we want. And that sorting has a lot to do with the processes of Saturn. What is ultimately real in any situation? Is this just something I want, or am I reacting from unconscious need, as opposed to what is my soul wanting to direct me towards? The other element of this is the flushing out of psychic emotional toxins that we've taken on from parental marriages, and these ancestral patterns. And this is where we can talk about the distorted faces of both the dark feminine and the sacred masculine. And we'll use the example of the very fierce goddess Lilith and the distortions to the Shiva archetype. Now there are two reasons for this. The Jupiter-Juno conjunction that's coming is a relatively lightweight version of the Shiva-Shakti relationship. Beautiful, very unifying, as I said. Both Jupiter and Juno are about rebonding energies that have previously been shattered and scattered, as I said, particularly in these last 5 years. However, the chart for this particular lineup has a square, a hard aspect to Lilith in Scorpio. And what this highlights is that Lilith, like her cousin Medusa and her older sister, the Black Moon, each of these parts of ourselves carry tremendous amount of unhealed trauma, betrayal and rage. And more often than not, that's particularly aimed at the masculine. This is stuff some of you will have heard me talk about before, where we have female ancestors who could have been like incredibly passionate, unique, potent, juicy women who are alive to their sexuality and their spirituality and who could have been great sacred warrioresses in the world. If we have that kind of lineage, and yet with the unfortunate truth that in most of our families those women were either unconscious of that potency or had to hand it over for the sake of security, socially acceptable sex roles, for the sake of relationships with men in a patriarchal setting. And this is the source of a lot of toxicity that travels down psychically from one generation to another. So in this experience of the sacred marriage that we're all having collectively next month, she, in her distorted form, represents a major obstacle to opening to this glorious union of Jupiter and Juno. But this is a surface appearance. Because when you look at the earlier history of Lilith, initially she was a goddess who was passionately committed to authentic, equal relationships. And she demanded equality on every level and was prepared to put herself and her life on the line for that. And like most of the other dark goddesses, in her healed form, she is a tantric queen. And so this leads us to one of the most important aspects of our work, is to learn how to flush out these distortions. This is more than just, mum and dad's relationships. This is more than relationship conditioning. This is about kind of bringing up this potent and extraordinary, brilliant goddess out of her own darkness so she feeds our relationships. So it's not to get caught in the notion that, okay, Lilith is actually deliberately blocking us taking this next step. She's kind of saying, look, you have to deal with me if you're going to have the very best of this collective opening. And that's the invitation. And the amazing thing is that these goddesses, at their essence, are the actual antidote to their distortions. So part of the journey is for us to make the commitment to do deep inner work. And in the case of carried rage, this demands kind of primal level therapy. It also, which can also be supported by any strong spiritual or therapeutic work that moves psychic emotional toxins, which in turn can also be complemented by using different forms of spiritual technology to consciously reclaim this face of the goddess. This is what's on offer here. And those of you who've been following my newsletters and my Nova columns will be aware that I have talked about how strong both Medusa and Lilith have been in terms of what's opening for us in terms of future relationship possibilities in the collective. So we must assist these goddesses to heal, and we must draw from their deeper essence to heal ourselves so that we can bring that potency and this kind of sacred feminine warrioress into our being and into our relating. So that's an example of what we need to do in terms of the deep inner feminine. As for Shiva, like Shiva, it's no mistake that he is the patron of Tantra. Like in his pure form, he is extraordinary, brilliant expression of the sacred masculine at its highest. At the refinement of pure expression of what initially is raw, instinctual, masculine power and aggression. This is him at his purity. And those of you who know Shiva know him as a mixture of like perfect yogi god who is still in the midst of the whole wheel of karma. Is that part of us that helps us maintain our center, irrespective of what dramas are going on in our worlds. On another level, he's a wild man who hangs out with wild animals and ghosts and spirits and hangs out in graveyards. He's beyond civilization, and so he's free, like one of his partners in the form of Kali. And yet, even though he is very purely masculine, he is intimately connected to the goddess. Any of his classical pictures, crescent moon is by his head, the goddess flows the Ganges out through his hair, the serpents around his neck and his arms. He is intimately, exquisitely interrelated with the goddess. And he's such a brilliant image for men to aspire towards, because it is he inside us who can meet the deep, sacred feminine in all her power as an equal. However, like any part of self, Shiva has his distortions. And obviously there are very few people on the planet who can embody this kind of energy well. But if we think back to the generation of our fathers and our grandfathers, it's like how even less men were capable of mirroring this image of the sacred masculine. Because distorted Shiva plays out where the natural detachment, the yogic detachment of Shiva, becomes a form of detachment which is escapist. It's where our fathers, although some of us had fathers who were potentially very powerful men. But their detachment made them emotionally unavailable. And often that detachment was an escape from whether their own pain and often their inability to relate healthily to the feminine, either to the goddess within themselves or the goddess within a partner. And when you get that kind of detachment, it comes with an emotional coldness. And there's a sense, particularly from the sensitive child, that you're always trying to reach him but never quite able to do so. The other distortion around Shiva energy, as I've written recently, is that you think of any form of fundamentalist, in any form of religion. It's where you get that extreme fundamentalist view of the world, which is devoid of connection with the feminine and acts destructively towards it. And so from the point of view of the healing our relationship to the sacred masculine, this is the kind of territory that we have to work with, where we in ourselves attempt the escapes because we can't stay with our bodies, or we have pain in our bodies that is unworked with and makes it hard to inhabit our being fully. So these are two different threads, and for any of us, whatever our gender, we have to work with both. The wounded masculine, the distorted dark feminine. But once again, the fruits of doing so are extraordinary and beyond whatever relationship objectives we have. Totally transformative.